The United Earth Defense Council chamber fell silent as General Chen finished speaking. Her words hung in the air, challenging the palpable fear that had settled over the room like a shroud. "With all due respect, General," said Secretary Donovan, his voice barely masking his irritation, "the hegemony fleet outmasses our entire defensive capability by a factor of 20. Their weapons technology is centuries beyond ours. How exactly do you propose we fight that?" Chen walked to the holographic display at the center of the room. With a few deft movements, she brought up images captured by deep space telescopes. The hegemony armada, massive ships like floating cities among the stars. "Look closer," she said, magnifying sections of the largest vessels. "Their design philosophy reflects their psychology. Centralized command structures, rigid hierarchical systems, predictable attack formations. They've conquered half the galaxy because no one has exploited these weaknesses." Dr. Harrison, the Council's senior xenobiologist, leaned forward. "You're suggesting they're vulnerable because they're too organized." "I'm suggesting," Chen replied, "that they've never faced a species that excels at chaos." The holographic display shifted to historical footage. Guerrilla fighters in ancient Earth conflicts, nimble startups outmaneuvering corporate giants, viral ideas spreading despite attempts at suppression. Humanity's greatest innovation has always been adaptation. Our entire evolutionary history is the story of turning disadvantages into strengths. We shouldn't fight the hegemony on their terms. We'll fight them on ours. Outside the secure facility, Earth continued its frantic preparations. In shipyards across the planet and orbital stations, vessels were being modified according to plans that made conventional military strategists uncomfortable. Civilian communication networks were being reconfigured into redundant meshes that could function even if major nodes were destroyed. Quantum encryption protocols were being distributed to resistance cells that hadn't yet formed. Chen left the council meeting without the full endorsement she'd hoped for, but with enough authority to implement the first phase of what she privately called Operation Underdog. Her aide, Lieutenant Katri, fell into step beside her as they walked toward the command center. "Half the council thinks you're insane," Katri observed quietly. "Only half. I'm making progress," Chen replied with the ghost of a smile. "What's the status on the deep space surveillance network?" "Fully operational but camouflaged," as Admiral Exorthal suggested. "The hegemony thinks our detection capabilities are limited to near-Earth orbit." "And the civilian evacuation plan?" "Ready to deploy, though it won't look like an evacuation. As far as the hegemony will be able to tell, it's just normal population movement." Chen nodded, satisfied. "And Project Chrysalis?" Katri handed her a secure tablet. "Dr. Wu reports significant progress. The biological countermeasures should be ready before the deadline." They reached the command center, a hive of controlled activity. Massive screens displayed real-time data from across the solar system, tracking the hegemony's methodical approach. Chen took a moment to observe her team. Scientists, soldiers, strategists from every continent, working with quiet determination. 27 days, she said softly. In 27 days, the hegemony learns what humans do best. "What's that, General?" asked Katri. Chen's eyes reflected the glowing tactical displays, constellations of light that represented humanity's improbable path to survival. "The impossible," she answered. Captain Madeline checked her stealth vessel's systems one final time as it drifted silently toward the hegemony communication hub orbiting Proxima Centauri. Her 12-person team, call sign Spectre, represented Earth's first offensive action in what the media had already dubbed the Impossible War. "Proximity alert," whispered Lieutenant Rodriguez from the sensor station. "Vox-Neri patrol craft. 2 kilometers and closing." Lynn nodded calmly, though her pulse quickened. The Vox-Neri were the hegemony's premier hunters, with sensory organs that could detect the body heat of a small mammal from orbit. If any species could spot their ship despite its advanced cloaking, it would be them. "Passive systems only," she ordered. "Minimal life support. Everyone into cooling suits." The temperature inside the vessel plummeted as the team donned special insulated gear designed by Dr. Kamal's Xenotech division. Their body heat signatures would temporarily vanish from Voxenary detection range. At least that was the theory. No human had ever tested it against actual Voxenary. The patrol craft glided overhead, its crystalline hull glinting in the light of Proxima Centauri. For 30 agonizing seconds, it seemed to pause, as if sensing something amiss. Then it continued on its predetermined route. Collective silent exhales fogged the suddenly cold air of the command deck. "That's one," murmured Lynn. "Only 7 alien species to outsmart." Her navigator grinned despite the tension. "At this rate, we'll be done by lunch." Back on Earth, General Chen stood in the central command hub beneath the Olympus Mons colony on Mars, humanity's most secure facility. Holographic displays showed hundreds of stealth vessels like Lynn's, each represented by a faint blue dot, spreading throughout hegemony territory. Some would fail. Chen had no illusions about that, but most would succeed because the hegemony expected direct confrontation, not infiltration. Casualty estimates. She asked her strategic A. Projected loss of 22% of deployed teams. Came the crisp response. Acceptable within mission parameters. Chen frowned. They're people, not statistics. Every loss matters. Yes, General, the AI acknowledged, learning from her correction. Dr. Kamal approached with a data tablet. The renowned xenoanthropologist had spent years studying intercepted hegemony communications before they'd even known humanity existed. "The first teams are reaching their targets," he reported. "Captain Lin's squad has bypassed Voxenary security using the thermal dampening technology. And the others? Mixed results. We've lost contact with 3 teams in the Sirius sector, but most are proceeding on schedule." On her private channel, Admiral Xorthal's voice echoed through chambers across Earth, continuing his regular broadcasts that alternated between reassurances about benevolent occupation and warnings about resistance. "Your formal surrender has been accepted. Cooperation will ensure minimal disruption to civilian life. Resistance is both futile and unnecessary." Chen muted the transmission mid-sentence. He still doesn't suspect anything. "The Hegemony High Command is proceeding with standard occupation protocols," Kamal confirmed. "Their arrogance blinds them. They've never needed to consider that surrender could be a strategic deception." A new alert flashed across the command displays. Captain Lin's team had reached their objective. "Operation Scattered Seeds has begun," Chen announced to her staff. "Now we show the hegemony why humans make terrible conquests." Across the galaxy, synchronized with millisecond precision, hundreds of human teams initiated their missions. The first shots of humanity's counter-offensive wouldn't be fired from massive warships or with planet-destroying weapons. Instead, they would come from shadows, from careful planning, and from the uniquely human talent for turning disadvantages into opportunities. Dr. Sophia Wu observed the hegemony patrol through her apartment window in what had once been downtown Seattle. The Zentari soldiers moved with their characteristic precision. 6-limbed forms in perfect synchronization, their iridescent scales gleaming under Earth's sun. Yet something was off about their movements. The usual fluid coordination had become hesitant, almost disjointed. "It's working," she whispered to herself, careful to show no outward emotion that might trigger the emotional detection scanners the occupiers had installed throughout the city. The microscopic compounds she had developed, named whisper particles by her team, had been released into the atmosphere 3 days ago through ordinary air filtration systems. Designed to interact specifically with the telepathic centers of hegemony neural systems, they created no obvious symptoms, just a gradual degradation of the aliens' ability to maintain their perfect collective awareness. Her secure tablet vibrated with an incoming message from the Resistance Network. Package delivered to distribution centers across all occupied zones. Effectiveness metrics requested. Wu tapped a careful response. Estimated 40% degradation in Zentari coordination, 35% in Voxenary. 60% in Talaxian. Continuing observations. A knock at her door froze her mid-sentence. She quickly activated the apartment's decontamination sequence, a standard procedure that would instantly neutralize any trace of whisper particles on her person or possessions. Before answering, a hegemony inspector stood in the hallway, accompanied by 2 Voxnary guards. The inspector, a Ophidian with translucent skin that revealed the complex network of neural pathways beneath, consulted a datapad. Citizen Wu, routine inspection. The alien announced, its speech translator rendering the words in flat English. You were identified as entering Medical District G7 yesterday during restricted hours. Wu maintained her practiced neutral expression. I was called to consult on a patient with radiation exposure. I have clearance documentation from Occupation Health Authority. She presented her official credentials, meticulously forged by the Resistance's Technology Division. The inspector examined them while one of the Voxnary guards seemed to lose focus, its compound eyes blinking in different rhythms, a side effect of the whisper particles interfering with their neural pathways. Is your guard unwell? Wu asked innocently. The inspector glanced at the Voxnary, irritation briefly crossing its features. Equipment malfunction, it stated dismissively. Your credentials appear valid. Continue your authorized activities, citizen. After they departed, Wu released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. She returned to her hidden laboratory, concealed behind a false wall in her kitchen pantry. Inside, the compact space contained equipment that would have impressed even hegemony scientists if they'd known humans possessed such technology. Her assistant, Dr. Kowalski, looked up from his microscope. Close call. The Voxnary are showing more severe symptoms than predicted, Wu replied. Activating the lab's secure communications. We need to adjust the particulate concentration before they realize it's not equipment malfunctions they're experiencing. Across the occupied territories, similar scenes played out as hegemony forces struggled with an invisible enemy they couldn't detect or combat. Admiral Sorthal's daily situation reports noted increasing incidents of communication failures, coordination errors, and inexplicable equipment malfunctions. In the Resistance headquarters beneath the ruins of Old Geneva, General Chen reviewed these reports with satisfaction. Dr. Wu's whisper particles are exceeding expectations, she told her assembled command staff. Phase 3 is proceeding ahead of schedule. Begin preparations for Phase 4. A junior officer raised her hand hesitantly. The cultural infiltration phase, ma'am. Is it wise to proceed when we haven't fully consolidated our advantages from the current phase? Chen smiled. That's exactly why we'll succeed. The hegemony thinks linearly. One phase must be completed before the next begins. Humans, we do everything simultaneously. It's messy, it's chaotic, and it's exactly what they can't predict. Captain Amara Okafor adjusted her holographic disguise as she strode through the grand entertainment complex on Hegemony Prime. To any observer, she appeared as a mid-caste Talaxian cultural officer, her simulated plumage displaying the subtle color patterns that indicated her fictional rank and lineage. The disguise was perfect, not just visually, but incorporating chemical signatures that fooled even the hegemony's advanced bioscanners. Position reached, she subvocalized, the quantum communicator embedded in her jaw transmitting the message across untraceable channels. Beginning upload sequence. The hegemony's central entertainment distribution hub, a massive crystalline structure resembling a blooming lotus, processed and disseminated all approved cultural content throughout their territory. What made it vulnerable wasn't a technological flaw but a conceptual one. The hegemony had never considered cultural transmission as a potential attack vector. Okafor plugged her data crystal, disguised as a standard hegemony authentication device, into the nearest terminal. The specialized code developed by Earth's Cyber Warfare Division began its work, slipping seamlessly into the distribution algorithms. Unlike crude human viruses, this code didn't damage or disrupt. It subtly altered, rearranged, and inserted. Is there a malfunction? Cultural Officer Mexel asked a Zenturi administrator, noticing her at the terminal. Okafor bowed in perfect Talaxian fashion, her holographic plumage rippling with appropriate deference. Routine cultural compliance verification, she replied in flawless Talaxian dialect. The 6th-tier entertainment packages for the outer colonies required additional authentication. The administrator nodded and moved on, satisfied with her explanation. Okafor allowed herself a small smile once he was out of sight. The code finished its integration, leaving no trace of tampering. Over the next cycle, entertainment streams throughout hegemony space would carry subtle alterations, stories where individual characters made choices that defied authority for moral reasons, music with rhythms that encouraged individual interpretation rather than synchronized movement, visual arts that portrayed beauty in asymmetry and imperfection rather than the hegemony's preferred perfect geometric forms. None of it was obviously subversive, that would trigger censorship algorithms. Instead, it planted seeds of concepts alien to hegemony culture: individual choice, questioning of hierarchies, the value of diversity in thought. Meanwhile, in the recreation sector of Outpost Zenith 7, the young Talaxian named Milix found himself inexplicably drawn to a forbidden human melody that had begun circulating among his peers. The haunting tune, Earth's ancient Moonlight Sonata, violated every principle of hegemony harmonic structure, yet something about its melancholy beauty resonated with him on a level he couldn't articulate. "You should delete that immediately," his clutchmate warned. "Consumption of unauthorized human cultural artifacts is a Level 3 violation." "I know," Melix replied, yet he made no move to erase the file. "But have you listened to it? Really listened? It makes me feel something I don't have a word for." "That's exactly why it's dangerous," his clutchmate insisted, nervously glancing around the communal space. "The Council of Cultural Purity says human art is designed to create emotional instability." Melix's fourth eye ridge lifted in a gesture of skepticism, a distinctly non-Talaxian expression he'd unconsciously adopted from watching leaked human broadcasts. "If that's true, why does the Council need to forbid it? Wouldn't instability be self-evidently undesirable?" The question hung in the air between them, dangerous in its simplicity. It was the kind of question that had never been asked in hegemony space before human contact, and precisely the kind that General Chen's cultural infiltration strategy had been designed to provoke. In her secure command center, Okafor reviewed the metrics of their cultural campaign. Phase 1 cultural penetration has reached 43% of target demographics, she reported to General Chen. The Talaxians are particularly responsive, just as Dr. Kamal predicted. Chen nodded thoughtfully. Ideas are harder to quarantine than people. The hegemony is about to learn that the hard way. Dr. Victor Ramirez stared at the holographic model hovering above the laboratory table, its complex geometric patterns shifting and realigning as the simulation processed new variables. The underground Antarctic facility, known simply as Deep Point, housed Earth's most brilliant minds working on the technological front of humanity's resistance. "Run it again," he instructed the quantum computer. "Increase power flow to the tertiary matrices by 12%. The simulation reconfigured, showing an incoming hegemony particle beam striking the prototype shield. Previously, such weapons had cut through Earth's best defenses like paper. This time, the energy dispersed harmlessly across the shield's surface in a cascade of blue-white light. "We've done it," whispered Dr. Lakshmi Patel, his chief engineer. "The Prometheus shield actually works." Ramirez allowed himself a moment of satisfaction before focusing on the practical challenges ahead. Theory and simulation are one thing. Can we manufacture it at scale with the resources we have? "We've been salvaging hegemony technology from destroyed scout ships," Patel replied, bringing up the inventory database. "Their quantum alignment crystals can be repurposed for our shield matrices. We have enough material to outfit approximately 200 vessels within the next 72 hours. Prioritize the stealth corvettes," Ramirez decided. "General Chen will want them for Operation Thunderbolt." In high orbit above Jupiter, Admiral Xorthal's flagship maintained its position at the center of the hegemony occupation fleet. The admiral reviewed the latest reports with growing frustration. Equipment malfunctions continued to plague his forces. Communication networks experienced inexplicable outages, and discipline among the lower castes, particularly the Talaxians, had deteriorated noticeably. "Explain to me," he demanded of his senior intelligence officer, "how a primitive species with inferior technology continues to disrupt our operations 3 months into the pacification process." The intelligence officer, a Voxenary whose normally perfect posture now seemed slightly slumped, struggled to provide an answer. "We believe they are employing unconventional tactics, Admiral." "Unconventional." Xorthal's voice remained controlled, but his skin flushed with the deep purple of suppressed rage. "Our species have conquered half the galaxy. We have encountered and overcome every possible defense strategy. Nothing should be unconventional to us." A proximity alert interrupted the briefing. Long-range sensors detected a small group of human vessels approaching from the direction of Mars. The tactical officer magnified the image, revealing a squadron of what appeared to be lightly armed Earth corvettes. "They're on an attack vector," the tactical officer reported with surprise. "But these vessels have minimal offensive capabilities according to our intelligence." A desperate gesture, Xorthal concluded. Perhaps they hope to boost morale with a symbolic last stand. He turned to his weapons officer. "Target the lead vessel with a standard particle lance. Let's remind them of the futility of resistance." The massive hegemony flagship rotated slightly, bringing its primary weapon to bear on the approaching Earth ships. The particle lance, capable of vaporizing small moons, discharged its devastating energy toward the lead corvette. Across the command deck, hegemony officers watched with the calm certainty of inevitable victory. That certainty transformed into disbelief as the energy beam struck the human vessel and dissipated harmlessly against a shield technology they had believed impossible for Earth to possess. "Impossible," whispered the tactical officer, the word itself nearly blasphemous in hegemony military doctrine. The human vessels accelerated, their formation tightening as they closed the distance to the hegemony fleet. New energy signatures bloomed across their hulls, weapon systems unlike anything in the hegemony database. In the lead corvette, Commander Sarah Chen, the general's younger sister, smiled grimly at the stunned faces of her bridge crew as the Prometheus shield absorbed another hegemony blast. "Nice work, Dr. Ramirez," she murmured. Then to her weapons officer, "Target their propulsion systems. Let's show Admiral Xorthal what humans call unconventional." Commander Ellis Jackson piloted his ghost ship through the debris field that had once been a hegemony patrol squadron. His vessel, little more than a sophisticated holographic projector equipped with minimal life support and propulsion, had never fired a single shot. It didn't need to. Phantom Fleet Alpha completing simulation run in Sector 9, he reported through the quantum network. Hegemony response time decreased by 18% compared to previous engagement. From the tactical center beneath Olympus Mons, General Chen acknowledged the report. Operation Phantom had evolved beyond their most optimistic projections. The hegemony, faced with sensor readings they couldn't trust and enemies they couldn't reliably track, had begun hesitating before engaging, second-guessing their own observations. Dr. Kamal joined her at the holographic display, showing hundreds of ghost ships interspersed with actual combat vessels across 12 sectors. The latest psychological profile updates from captured hegemony officers confirm our hypothesis, he said, his voice quiet with the satisfaction of scientific validation. Their neural structures physically struggle with uncertainty. "Explain," Chen prompted, though she had reviewed his reports thoroughly. "All 7 hegemony species evolved in environments with high predictability," Kamal elaborated. "Their brains process information sequentially and prefer linear causality. When faced with contradictory data, ships that appear and disappear, enemies that seem to be everywhere simultaneously, Their decision-making centers experience something analogous to a processing overload. Chen nodded. And the Voxenari are the most affected. Precisely. As apex predators, their evolutionary psychology demands certainty about target acquisition. The phantom ships trigger their equivalent of cognitive dissonance. Some are experiencing what we might call panic attacks, completely unprecedented in their species. Across the battlefield, a Voxenari battle group commander named Krelvor struggled to maintain composure as his neural implants displayed yet another contradictory sensor reading. Human vessels seemed to materialize from nowhere, approached to the edge of weapons range, then vanished before his ships could lock targeting systems. "Sector clear," reported his sensor officer, only for 3 human signatures to appear on the opposite vector moments later. "Impossible," Krelvor hissed, his razor-lined breathing sacs flaring with stress pheromones that affected the entire bridge crew. "No species possesses such advanced cloaking technology." His second-in-command, detecting the commander's distress, suggested quietly, "Perhaps we should withdraw to defensive positions until we can analyze these anomalies." Withdraw. The word itself was nearly taboo in Voxenari military doctrine. Yet, as another cluster of human signals appeared, impossibly close to their position, Krelvor found himself giving the order that no Voxenari commander had given in 9 centuries of hegemony expansion. Tactical withdrawal. All vessels, regroup at fallback coordinates. As the Voxenari ships retreated, Commander Jackson allowed himself a tight smile. His ghost ship had never been within actual weapons range of the enemy. The entire engagement had been an elaborate illusion, created through holographic projections, falsified quantum signatures, and precisely calibrated electromagnetic distortions. Ghost Fleet to command. Voxenari Battle Group is retreating from Sector 9. 0 casualties sustained. 0 ammunition expended. In the adjacent sector, a very real human strike force waited in perfect position to ambush the retreating hegemony ships. The commander of this force, Colonel Hiroshi Tanaka, received the updated coordinates of the Voxenari withdrawal route from Operation Phantom's Central Command. "Perfect timing," he told his weapons officer. "They're following exactly the escape vector Dr. Kamal predicted. Prepare all weapons systems. Let's make sure their first retreat becomes their last stand." As the hegemony ships fled from phantoms, they flew directly into the waiting guns of reality, a microcosm of humanity's entire strategy against a technologically superior foe. Use perception to manipulate, psychology to unbalance, and precision to defeat. Ambassador Lyra Dalton smoothed the fabric of her formal diplomatic attire as she entered the neutrality zone on Europa. The Ice Moon's subsurface ocean had been partially terraformed by the hegemony into a diplomatic meeting ground, neutral territory, where various species could interact without the need for environmental suits. Waiting for her were representatives from the Zentari and Ophidian delegations, 2 of the hegemony's founding species. That they had agreed to this clandestine meeting all represented a seismic shift in the conflict's dynamics. Ambassador Dalton greeted the Zentari representative, Senior Adjudicator Vex Moore. His crystalline exoskeleton refracted the blue-tinged light of the chamber. "Your message indicated matters of mutual benefit. We are skeptical, but present." The Ophidian delegate, Science Overseer Slith, observed her with multifaceted eyes that seemed to process every micro-expression. "The High Council has authorized this dialogue with considerable reservation. Explain your proposal quickly." Dalton activated a holographic display between them. "These are the current boundaries of hegemony territory," she began, the map showing vast swaths of the galaxy under their control. Then she overlaid projections of territory losses based on current conflict trajectories. "And this is where things are headed in the next standard year if hostilities continue." The Ophidian's breathing sacs expanded slightly, the equivalent of a sharp intake of breath. "These projections are improbable. No mathematical model supports such rapid territorial degradation. Your models don't account for the psychological warfare effects we've implemented," Dalton replied evenly. nor for the exponential spread of human cultural influences among your subjugated populations. The Talaxian rebellion alone has reduced hegemony effective control by 17%. She switched to a different projection. Now, this is our proposed solution. Earth offers the Zentari exclusive mining rights to the asteroid belt for 100 years. For the Ophidians, unrestricted access to human medical and biological research data. In exchange for, Vexmore's voice remained neutral, but the slight shift in his posture revealed interest. Neutrality, Dalton stated simply. Withdraw your forces from this conflict and recognize Earth's sovereignty. Impossible, Slith declared, though with less conviction than might have been expected. The hegemony does not fragment. Unity is our foundational principle. Unity through coercion has its limits, Dalton observed. The Talaxians have already broken away. How long before others follow? We're offering you a dignified exit rather than a defeat. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, Admiral Exorthal faced the most difficult briefing of his long career. The Hegemony High Council's holographic avatars surrounded him, their expressions ranging from concern to outright hostility. Explain these failures, demanded High Counselor Zex Malin, his ancient voice carrying the weight of 10,000 years of hegemony dominance. How has a single primitive species managed to not only resist our forces, but turn 3 of our member species against us? Thorthal struggled to articulate what had become increasingly clear to him. They do not think as we do, he began carefully. Their strategies defy prediction because they embrace chaos rather than order. They attack simultaneously on multiple fronts: technological, biological, psychological, cultural. When we adapt to one approach, they shift to another. Unacceptable, the High Counselor interrupted. You will gather all remaining loyal forces for a final decisive strike against their homeworld. This resistance ends now. Though he harbored grave doubts, Olorithal bowed in acknowledgement. As the Council commands, as his flagship marshaled the largest hegemony battle fleet ever assembled, Thorthal received an encrypted transmission, a direct violation of protocol that somehow bypassed all security measures. The message was brief but devastating. Telemetry data showing the Zentari and Ophidian fleets withdrawing from their positions, leaving critical sectors exposed. The unthinkable had happened. The hegemony, undefeated for millennia, was beginning to fracture from within. The terraformed Martian landscape stretched out beneath the crystal dome of the Grand Assembly Hall, red plains giving way to the beginnings of blue lakes and green vegetation, a living symbol of transformation. Inside, representatives from Earth and all 7 former hegemony species gathered around a circular table that itself represented a radical departure from hegemony design philosophy, which had always placed the dominant species at the head. General Maya Chen, now bearing the title of Earth Defense Coordinator, studied the assembled delegates. 1 year ago, most of these species had been bent on humanity's subjugation. Today, they assembled as equals to sign the Solar Accords. Ambassador Dalton stood to address the gathering. The document before you establishes not just peace, but a new framework for interstellar cooperation. No species above another. No technology hoarded for domination. No culture suppressed for convenience. As the signing ceremony proceeded, Shen received a private notification. Admiral Thorthal had requested a meeting. She slipped away from the main proceedings to a smaller adjoining chamber where the once feared hegemony commander waited. The admiral had changed since his capture during the final battle for Earth. His proud bearing remained, but the certainty that had defined him seemed to diminish, replaced by something Chen recognized as curiosity. Coordinator Chen, he greeted her formally. I wish to speak with you before returning to what remains of hegemony space. You're being released, Chen asked, though she already knew. The decision had been controversial, but ultimately symbolic of the new order they hoped to build, as a gesture of your species' peculiar concept of reconciliation. Kilworthal confirmed. But before I depart, I must understand. For my own peace, His hesitation on the word peace spoke volumes. The concept had rarely been relevant in hegemony thinking until now. Throughout my 8 centuries commanding hegemony forces, I conquered 37 spacefaring species, he continued. None resisted successfully. Many had superior numbers. Some had comparable technology. Several were more unified than humanity. Yet they all fell, while your species prevailed. I have analyzed the variables repeatedly and found no satisfactory explanation. Chen considered how to answer. The treaty signing continued in the background, visible through the transparent partition separating the chambers. You analyzed us as a problem to be solved, she finally said. That was your first mistake. Humans aren't equations with predictable outcomes. We're contradictions that somehow function anyway. She gestured toward the assembly. Look at them. The Talaxians embraced our art. The Zentari admired our resource efficiency. The Ophidians respected our biological adaptability. The Voxenari, surprisingly, came to appreciate our warrior spirit. You exploited our differences against us, Kvorthel observed. No, Chen corrected. We recognized your differences as potential strengths, just as we've learned to do with our own. The hegemony demanded conformity. Humanity has always thrived on diversity, of thought, of approach, of solution. Outside the window, a Martian sunset painted the landscape in shades of gold and crimson. The first colony ships bearing mixed crews of humans and former hegemony species were visible on the launch platforms, preparing for joint exploration missions to systems no single species had visited before. Your victory is instructive, Exorthal admitted. Perhaps there are lessons here that the remaining hegemony worlds would benefit from learning. Chen smiled slightly. That sounds remarkably like adaptation, Admiral. Perhaps there's hope for your species yet. As they returned to the main chamber for the ceremony's conclusion, Chen reflected on humanity's improbable journey. Their victory hadn't come from being stronger, more advanced, or more numerous than their enemies. It had come from being quintessentially human, adaptable, unpredictable, creative, and stubbornly persistent in the face of impossible odds. The signing complete, Earth's new chapter in the galactic community began, not as conquerors, but as innovators, not through dominance, but through the very diversity that had once been dismissed as weakness. The stars, once filled with threats, now beckoned with possibilities.